Have you ever noticed something strange? The people who seem to want love the most often struggle the hardest to find it. Meanwhile, some people stumble into beautiful relationships almost effortlessly. Why? What's the difference? Is it luck, timing, attractiveness, or is there something nobody is talking about? Here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people aren't actually searching for love. They're searching for relief. Relief from loneliness. Relief from boredom. Relief from feeling unwanted. And that's exactly where the problem begins. Because the moment love becomes your escape, it quietly stops being love and starts becoming something else. But we'll come back to that. First, let me tell you about Steffi. Seraphine was the kind of person everyone assumed would find love easily. Kind, funny, successful. The type of person friends described as the total package. Yet every relationship seemed to end the same way. Different partner, different circumstances, same heartbreak. At first, she blamed bad luck. Then she blamed modern dating. Then she blamed the men she dated. But one night, after another painful breakup, she sat alone staring at her phone. And for the first time, she asked herself a question she had been avoiding for years. What if the problem isn't who I'm choosing? What if it's why I'm choosing them? That question changed everything. And it might change everything for you too. Because what Seraphine discovered is something psychologists have understood for decades. Many people enter relationships hoping another person will complete something missing inside themselves. The problem is, no human being can successfully carry that responsibility forever. At first, it feels romantic. You meet someone, they text constantly, they make you feel special, important, chosen. Suddenly life feels brighter, food tastes better, music sounds deeper. Even ordinary days feel magical. But then something happens. The texts slow down, life gets busy, the honeymoon phase fades, and what once felt like love starts feeling like anxiety. You begin wondering, do they still care? Why aren't they responding? Am I losing them? And that's where many relationships quietly begin to crack. Not because love disappeared, but because fear appeared. And fear has a way of disguising itself as love. But before we go further, there's something even more surprising, because the biggest obstacle to finding real love isn't rejection, it's attachment. Let me explain. Imagine you're drowning. Someone throws you a life raft. You grab it desperately. You cling to it with all your strength. That makes perfect sense. But now imagine that life raft is another human being, a boyfriend, a girlfriend, a spouse. What happens? The relationship slowly becomes less about connection and more about survival. You stop loving freely, you start loving fearfully. Every disagreement feels dangerous, every delayed reply feels personal, every little change feels like a threat. And without realizing it, you begin squeezing the very thing you're afraid of losing. This is one reason so many modern relationships struggle. Not because people don't care, but because they care from a place of fear instead of security. And fear changes everything. But here's the twist. The solution isn't becoming cold. It's not pretending you don't need anyone. It's not embracing some fake version of independence. The real solution is much harder and much more powerful. You have to build a life that feels meaningful before someone arrives. Because when your happiness depends entirely on another person, you unintentionally turn them into your emotional oxygen. And nobody wants to spend their life being someone else's oxygen tank. They want to be a partner. There's a difference, a huge difference. But wait, because the next mistake is even more common, and almost nobody sees it. A man named Sam spent years searching for the one. Dating apps, blind dates, social media, friends setting him up. He was constantly searching, constantly evaluating, constantly asking, could this be her? And every date felt like an interview. Every conversation felt like an assessment. Every interaction carried pressure. Years passed. Nothing worked. Then one day, a friend pointed something out. Something brutal. Something honest. You spend so much time looking for the right person that you've stopped becoming the right person. That sentence hit him like a truck. Because deep down, he knew it was true. Many people approach love like a treasure hunt. They believe happiness exists somewhere inside another person, waiting to be discovered. But real love doesn't work that way. The healthiest relationships aren't built by two people searching for completion. They're built by two people bringing completeness. Not perfection, completeness. There's a difference. Perfection doesn't exist. Completeness means you've developed enough self-awareness that another person enhances your life, instead of becoming your life. And that's when something fascinating happens. The energy changes. Desperation disappears. Authenticity appears. You stop chasing. You start connecting. You stop performing. You start revealing. And people can feel the difference immediately. But there's still one final truth, the one that nobody wants to hear. And yet, it may be the most important lesson of all. If you genuinely want real love, you must become willing to lose people. Not because you don't care, but because you respect yourself enough not to abandon who you are. Think about that. How many people stay silent to avoid conflict? How many hide their needs? How many pretend they're okay when they're not? How many shrink themselves to keep someone interested? Thousands, millions, maybe even you. And every time it happens, a relationship is built on a version of yourself that isn't real. Eventually, the mask becomes exhausting. The resentment grows. The connection weakens. And people wonder what went wrong. But what went wrong wasn't the relationship. It was the foundation. Because real love cannot connect with a version of you that's pretending. Real love requires visibility. And visibility requires courage. The courage to be honest. The courage to be vulnerable. The courage to risk rejection. Because here's the paradox. The very thing most people fear, being rejected for who they truly are, is actually the doorway to finding someone who genuinely loves them. Not the performance, not the mask, not the carefully edited version, the real person. And that changes everything. So if you genuinely want real love, watch what happens the next time you feel lonely. Watch what happens when someone gives you attention. Watch what happens when you're tempted to chase validation. Ask yourself, am I looking for love? Or am I looking for relief? Because those two things can feel incredibly similar, but they lead to very different destinations. One creates dependency, the other creates connection. One is driven by fear, the other is built on trust. One desperately asks, will you save me? The other quietly says, let's grow together. And maybe, just maybe, the reason real love feels so difficult to find isn't because it's rare. Maybe it's because most people are searching for it in the wrong place. Not in another person, but inside a version of themselves they've never fully met. So here's my question for you. What's the biggest lesson love has taught you about yourself? Drop your answer in the comments, because somebody reading it might need to hear exactly what you've learned. And if this story resonated with you, share it with someone who's still searching for real love. You never know whose life it might change. And remember, the healthiest relationships aren't built when two people find each other. They're built when two people finally find themselves. Then choose each other anyway. subscribe to Relationship Lab Files, and I'll see you in the next one.